I'm riding to the crib, I'm riding home. See like 3 cop cars.
The U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments today on whether cities can ban homeless camps and punish people for sleeping outdoors.
So this case stems from a small city in Oregon. It tried to stop people from sleeping outside, even if they had nowhere else to go. The homeless people are suing, claiming the law is cruel and unusual punishment. So you may remember last month, Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill to ban public sleeping in the state, but promised expanded resources.
That's why today I'm signing HB 1365. It will help maintain and ensure that Florida streets are clean and that Florida streets are safe for our residents.
So you at least in some way feel homelessness contributes to a lack of safety. Very interesting. Seems that would be more reason to resource and eradicate it. But in the eyes of the federal Supreme Court, entertaining the idea that declaring war on the homeless somehow makes more sense. Makes sense. Make it make sense. The United States of America versus its displaced population. What a war. The U.S. Supreme Court weighs federal law to ban the homeless from sleeping outside. There's so much wrong with this state of events, I almost don't know where to start. So I'll start briefly by saying, further pushing the responsibility onto local governments who are already overtaxing their citizens, the road piracy and other things, and framing that as the chief nobility in the matter is not only disrespectful and insulting, it's condescending and it's ignorant to think that any open eyes wouldn't see through that fraud. Local governments are already taxing and overtaxing its citizens to deal with many local issues, including assisting and resourcing local homeless populations. And a lot of that money probably isn't even making it to the local homeless populations or a solution for their problems or any problems that may be created for the communities because of the problems that our displaced have. These are not aliens among us. As we will hear so eloquently stated in this story, they are us. Because at any given high-minded moment, we could become them. Today on the Corruption Report.
So you may remember last month, Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill to ban public sleeping in the state, but promised expanded resources.
Florida's cool table gets a bill and laws passed for their pleasure. Florida's displaced population gets promises and brand new taxpayer-funded partitioned benches at local bus stops so they can't sleep there. Anybody making it make sense yet?
Today I'm signing HB 1365. It will help maintain and ensure that Florida streets are clean and that Florida streets are safe for our residents.
Now, the new law takes effect October 1st. It would allow people and businesses to sue local governments that do not uphold the ban. Cities would also have to set up designated areas for homeless people to camp, complete with bathrooms, showers, and some services once local shelters are full. Now, people living there are banned from using alcohol or illegal drugs. News 6's Laverne McGee is live outside of the Christian Services Center in downtown Orlando. So, Laverne, what are they saying about this situation?
Lisa, at centers like this one behind me, they say they're absolutely full, and so are the other service centers and shelters in Central Florida. And they say more and more people are seeking help. At a rally earlier today, they were calling for more economical housing. This group of local homeless advocates, elected officials, and concerned citizens gathered this morning at the federal courthouse to protest against the Supreme Court possibly ruling in favor of finding and arresting homeless people who sleep outside, even if shelters are full. U.S. Congressman Maxwell Frost shared that at one point in time, he was homeless and slept in his car for a month. The 27-year-old says he had bad credit, spending his money running for Congress, and was driving an Uber which didn't pay enough for him to afford an apartment.
I remember sleeping on couches, sleeping in my car, asking friends if I could stay with them.
According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, more than 650,000 people across the country are living in shelters or outside. Eric Gray, executive director of the Christian Service Center for the Homeless, said at the rally that he's seeing more and more people who have never been homeless now out on the streets due to soaring rent and the high cost of living.
There's a higher percentage of people who are one paycheck away from falling into homelessness. And because of that and the rising cost of housing, this issue of arrests and fines around homeless adults just adds to the ever-growing problem and the ever-growing danger of rising homelessness right here in Central Florida.
To fix this, we have to fix the housing crisis. When rent goes up, guess what also goes up? The amount of people who experience homelessness.
Now, this area behind me is actually scheduled for $6 million worth of improvements from the city of Orlando, but advocates say that's actually not enough to take care of the amount of people who need these services. Reporting live from downtown Orlando, Laverne McGee, Getting Results, News 6.
Trailhand Bill, reporting live, Miami, Florida. You can call me Grandma Grandson. I feel like there's a lot of audacity in these interactions surrounding this conversation. Thank God that He is God and not men or women. I was leaving Panera Bread the other night, and I parked by this gentleman who's always here, much like me and some of the other regulars. And I realized that night that the young man was probably living out of his minivan. I've encountered that so much since I've been in Florida. I am a Georgia boy. It blows my mind and usually breaks my heart too. We are going to come back to that. But how are you? And thank you for joining us at the Corruption Report. Feel free to subscribe, hit the thumbs up, notification bell, or thumbs down, as you wish. This may be an extended version of this segment, depending on how long it takes me to get some cohesion with all the thoughts I'm having about this matter. Let me be the first to say, I have no issue whatsoever with displaced men, women, children, and or families occupying public places that my tax dollars pay for, in whatever ways are most comfortable for them. The only time I could ever foresee that being an issue is when considering the activities they're engaged in, non-criminal and otherwise. Otherwise, I'd be absolutely ashamed for disparaging thoughts to automatically cross my mind in the presence of any displaced soul, especially if it happened before I stopped to ask myself or them if there's anything I could do to help. It's not about being Superman or Superwoman. It's just about realizing we're all human and everyone needs someone. Plus, that's how grandma raises. And now that my overly somber introduction is well out of the way, man, let me get in these folks. Let's consider a few of the main reasons the government and or whoever else may want to eradicate without resourcing our displaced population. Criminalize their existence, arrest them, throw them in jail, send them to prison. Why do they even have the audacity to breathe the same air as us, right? Or exile them to these isolated bubbles as if these isolated bubbles throughout the country are in already overflowing capacity. I told y'all, man, it's the audacity. You can't be thinking about the same homeless population that these gentlemen, that these men, women, and I don't know if I've seen any children out there. I told you I don't like to embellish. We're standing outside of the federal courthouse, lending their voices to. You can't be talking about that. You're probably only thinking about drug-addicted men, right? Because those are the ones that are easy to discard. But we're going to talk about that later, Lord willing. I just know y'all can't be talking about these displaced women and children that many, if not all of us, have seen also populating the homeless censorship. That wouldn't sell good on the campaign trail. But back to the criminal activity our displaced may be involved in. That would be one of the main reasons we would want them secluded, exiled, far away from us and our clean, safe communities. Just the thought reminded me how confused I am about our process of choosing which crimes and drug addictions should trigger resources and which crimes and drug addictions should trigger arrest. America has an opioid epidemic right now, according to America, and we're throwing resources at it. Even though opioid addiction is responsible for some of the most horrendous crimes humanity has ever seen. Somehow, this wave has triggered nothing in us more than resources, consideration, and compassion for its indulgers. I'm sure there are some crack and heroin addicts who would have loved to have benefited from such willing and forgiving grace. But all they got was mass criminalization, arrest, and prosecution. And an intrusive hitchhiker, appearing in the form of this radical perpetuation that we are somehow un-American if we acknowledge the motivations and disparity existing in two very conflicting responses to absolutely identical social issues. Those motivations being related to race or social class were and are always no less obvious either way. If I seem to be on a tangent, I'm not. Because just like drug addiction, homelessness has levels. And since we've already seen America and its government officials display very contradictory and hypocritical responses to drug addiction, and if nothing else, the similarity of different levels remains between drug addiction and homelessness, so does my original question. Who gets to decide which displaced experiences should trigger resources and compassion, and which should trigger mass criminalization, arrest, and prosecution? And how would those decisions be made? Because it seems a little wild to me for pseudo-elite groups to sit in rooms far away, totally disconnected from the desperations of poverty, making lawful, irresistible decisions about how those drowning in it should navigate what they do and don't have to work with. Exhibit A, Ron DeSantis, with tens of millions to waste on a failed presidential campaign, while I'm in your state constantly having chance encounters with the displaced. Even families. Seen a beautiful little girl running through a business that I was in. A later encounter with her father and mother revealed that they were homeless and sleeping outside. Maybe you should take some of that money you raise lobbying for failed election campaigns and some of that time you continually use signing laws that disproportionately affect the less fortunate and spread it throughout your state to the people that you seem to have no regard for, who, whether you like it or not, are part of your citizenship. You want Florida to be clean. Maybe you should start with the trash in the mirror. Clean that up. And anything that resembles it. And anything that contributes to the hell displaced men, women, and children find themselves navigating. Including the fact that you and a few of your high-minded friends want to decide they can't, at their convenience, access public places that we pay for. Who the hell are you? Mr. and Mrs. Audacity. Besides, out of your mind. I'm actually proud of me because that's not how I wanted to say that. Praise God. I can't speak for anybody but me, but since I do get a vote, I think I've already clarified I didn't sign off on this foolishness. Displaced people do not bother me. And on the few occasions when I have been bothered by them, whether they were actually bothering me or I was just easily irritable and being a jerk, I never needed criminal laws to be signed into effect. I never needed them to be criminalized or arrested to deal with that. They're human beings. I know how to talk to adults. If it ever rose to that occasion, that's what I pay law enforcement officers for. I don't need a bill for that, Mr. DeSantis and whoever else thinks that the American public does. And furthermore, I don't make deals with terrorists, especially to terrorize humans created in God's image. And even if you are part of the American public who thinks we need legislation to deal with our displaced population, I don't begrudge you your opinion. I just vehemently disagree with you the way you vehemently disagree with me. I told y'all the Panera story, man. I'm leaving the other night and I realized one of the gentlemen there, man, he's a little obnoxious. I won't lie. I don't like to embellish things, but the guy's very kind. He's always helping people, joyful spirit, smiling, informative, not a negative person at all in my estimation. And I realized that, the guy definitely is probably, I'm trying to be gracious and say it, but for all intents and purposes, he seems to be living out of his minivan. I mentioned, I was in an establishment and a beautiful little girl ran through. She looked like Pippi Longstocking. She couldn't have been any more than 5 or 6. I had just left Publix, man. I'm a sweets fiend. They had a deal on the Hostess cupcakes. I had bought 2 for $5. So I got about 14 to 16 cupcakes. I'm about to go home and they're going to last me a week and a half. And I see this little girl and I look up and I see where she's running, and she's running to this dude who had been there for a minute. And I could tell he probably was down on his luck a little bit. And then I looked up and then a woman entered. I did get to speak with them later, and basically they were a homeless family living outside. What did that little girl do to deserve that? I could tell you countless stories that I've encountered like that since I've been in Florida. And I can also tell you that they have definitely reminded me how much Florida changed my perspective and context of our displaced population. Because from where I'm from, we do see homelessness, a lot of it. But once again, I mentioned this and I'm going to mention it some more. It's usually men, you know what I mean? Not necessarily drug addicted men, but definitely some of those. But it's usually men and then women who have addiction problems as well. I didn't see as many families, and then I didn't see as many functioning adults. And then I come to Florida, and like the gentleman said in the newscast, it's damn near everybody. You would see people and you would interact with them on a everyday and normal and natural and regular basis, and you wouldn't realize that they're homeless until you see their circumstances by chance, because they don't go around mentioning it, whether they're ashamed of it or whether it's just such a natural part of their lives now. It's not something they think to bring up. But anywhere from just men who have addiction problems to men who are functional citizens to women who fall in the same boat to families who fall in the same boat, especially in a place like Florida where the cost of living is so high, right? It doesn't matter how much money you make. Sometimes you can be priced out. And that is something I wonder if the DeSantises of the world and the government officials who want to ban our displaced men, women, and children and families from sleeping outside in public areas are considering. Because it's not just the unmentionables that we speak of when it's time to speak of homelessness and experiences like this. And even if it were, that's no license to disregard them as if their lives and troubles don't matter. But it's not. It's your sons, it's your daughters, it's your mothers, it's your fathers. It is us. They are us. We are them. The levels. Remember? The social drifters who live outside because they choose to. The drug addicts who follow their addictions wherever that may lead. The recently widowed family who had their world rocked by the passing of a major part of their foundation. There's no one demographic on this very diverse spectrum of life's challenges. And so regardless of what the government seems to think, there's no one solution either. But that won't stop them from pretending they have one. Let's tell them they can't sleep outside. We'll pass a federal law, and then we'll send out our publicly funded gang of thieves, misfits, and murderers to arrest them, kidnap them, throw them in jail cells, and criminalize their existence and the hardships they face. Their crime? Not leaving publicly accessible areas to go somewhere else. They're homeless. Where else are they going to go? Homelessness is an issue that primarily affects men, the hunters and gatherers, providers and protectors of society. Most, if not all of us, have been conditioned to see provision as a primary responsibility of manhood, if not the primary responsibility of manhood. With that in mind, spoken or not, there's a social agreement that any man who can't provide for himself is a failure. He's in no way possible, simply another human being who may need the assistance anyone who found themselves in his shoes could benefit from, who most probably would get as long as they check the right special interest boxes. A man who can't help himself deserves no help. Not many, if any, would say that out loud, but again, it is very commonly accepted social doctrine. I wonder if this is what allows us to see homelessness as something we need to attack instead of aid. If the majority of America's displaced population were women or children, or women and children, will we be more apt to drown the issue in resources? I'm not going to pretend I don't know what the answer is. We're discussing elected officials, right? What's the better public relations win? What sells better on the campaign trail? Helping men or helping women and children? Discarding men or discarding women and children? Again, I won't pretend I don't know what the answer is. We're back to those obvious disparities and motivations that it makes us un-American to acknowledge. Well, this is the corruption report. And one of my taglines is conversations we can't afford to not have, because every crooked king must fall. The irony in what I think is society's misandric expendables logic is that in the callous disregard of men, there are also no lifeboats for the many women and children whose lives are a sea of disproportionate poverty. I'm saying you aren't even motivated to care for the people you pretend to care for. You have to be reminded that they even exist. There's more natural motivation in you to disregard the ones that you consider unmentionable. Credibility can't get any worse. The best news is there are so many great men and women who help and want to do more to help our displaced brothers and sisters and families. The bad news is evil never sleeps. But the way America is trending sneakily and speedily towards police state, if it ever decides to, it probably can get a bed outside, even if our homeless friends can't. I don't even think corruption adequately describes the reality that this conversation is taking place among sound-minded adults in positions of responsibility. It's way past that. Seems just evil to me. This is an extensive conversation, and I never intended to attempt to cover it in one video. It just pricked my heart when I seen it, and I wanted to respectfully speak my mind about it. So I did that, and the rest I leave with my prayers to God, that He will continue to protect the vulnerable from the callous disregard of those who seem mighty. I didn't go home with any Hostess cupcakes that day. Pippi Longstockings got them all. Because that's how Grandma raised us. Praise God. I'm sure she was excited to go back and share them with her friends. They are not aliens among us. They are us. I almost forgot the best part, man. Remember when I said any open eyes would be able to see through that fraud? They're so arrogant in their audacity, they don't even try to hide it from us. And I quote verbatim, the new law means people and local businesses will be able to sue the city. Who do you think pays when the city loses a lawsuit? So basically, the government wants to create a law that allows us to sue ourselves for their benefit. Anybody making it make sense yet?
This group of local homeless advocates, elected officials, and concerned citizens gathered this morning at the federal courthouse to protest against the Supreme Court possibly ruling in favor of finding and arresting homeless people who sleep outside, even if shelters are full. U.S. Congressman Maxwell Frost shared that at one point in time he was homeless and slept in his car for a month. The 27-year-old says he had bad credit, spending his money running for Congress, and was driving an Uber, which didn't pay enough for him to afford an apartment.
I remember sleeping on couches, sleeping in my car, asking friends if I could stay with them.
According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, more than 650,000 people across the country are living in shelters or outside. Eric Gray, executive director of the Christian Service Center for the Homeless, said at the rally that he's seeing more and more people who have never been homeless now out on the streets due to soaring rent and the high cost of living.
There's a higher percentage of people who are one paycheck away from falling into homelessness. And because of that and the rising cost of housing, this issue of arrests and fines around homeless adults just adds to the ever-growing problem and the ever-growing danger of rising homelessness right here in Central Florida.
To fix this, we have to fix the housing crisis. When rent goes up, guess what also goes up? The amount of people who experience homelessness.
Laverne, going back to that Supreme Court case, where do things stand right now?
Well, right now, they're not expected to make a decision until approximately June of this year, but people are watching this very closely. Here in our area, the state of Florida is watching, and also the city of Orlando.
Safe for our residents, safe for our residents, safe for our residents. What about if the residents become part of the displaced population? Are they now no longer safe for us too? Thank you if you made it this far. If you liked the video, feel free to hit that thumbs up button. I greatly appreciate it. If you care to go a little further than that, maybe even subscribe, hit the notification bell. Check out a few of the other videos on the channel. Either way, y'all be safe. And thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Corruption Report. Miami never sleeps, but I'm going to right now.